50 years constitute a golden jubilee, a celebration of life for half a century. But for the imposition of martial law on September 21, 1972, 5 decades recall years of infamy, repression, corruption, and economic spoliation, the darkest years in Philippine history. Mankind celebrates both anniversaries of bliss and liberation, as well as years of despair and subjugation. Mr. Speaker, we must never forget the tragic and horrific past where friends and kin were suffered to torture, extrajudicial killings, and enforced disappearances for their convictions and heroism. We must always remember the years of state terrorism by a dictator, as we firmly resolve never to allow this national tragedy to again besiege us. Filial defense is understandable, but history does not lie in documenting the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. during his martial law regime. His son's denials do not and cannot change the horrors of the past. It cannot repeal statutes and overturn Supreme Court decisions declaring indubitably the atrocities and banalities of the Marcos dictatorship. Mr. Speaker, distinguished colleagues, for as long as President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. persists in denying the undeniable dictatorship of his father, then Marcos Jr. will forever be known as the son of the Marcos dictator. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, distinguished colleagues.
We appreciate the effort of our colleague, Congressman Lagman, to speak about this topic sa araw na ito habang ginugunita natin ang 50th year ng deklarasyon ng martial law sa ating bansa. The youth of today will not forget and will continue to study the lessons that have been imparted to us by past generations who fought for democracy in our country and who try to push for the rights of our people so that these are protected from any types of threats or attacks. Sa panahon ngayon, Mr. Speaker, ay tila ba nararamdaman pa rin natin yung mga hibo ng repressive and tyrannical rule sa ating bansa. At hindi din dyan nakakatakas at isa pa nga sa mga primaryang target ang mga kabataang Pilipino. Naninindigan tayo na hindi labag sa batas ang pagmulat sa mata ng mga kapwa-kabataan at mamamayan. Direktang pamamasista na ito, katulad ng nangyari sa Nazi Germany at noong batas militar ni Marcos Sr. Inilunsad ang aktibidad na iyon para ipaalam sa bagong henerasyon ng kabataan ang malagim na kasaysayan ng batas militar sa bansa. Mr. Speaker, nakakapangilabot na ang mga nangyari dati na nababasa lang natin sa mga nobela, sa mga iba't ibang akda, sa mga historical books, ay sinisikap ng inormalize ngayon, Mr. Speaker. Kaya naman, sa bahagi natin, hindi natin papahintulutan na magpatuloy pa ang ganitong aktibidad ng mga law enforcement agents natin na dapat ay nagtitiyak ng peace and order sa ating bansa. Hindi po banta sa peace and order ang pag-aaral ng kasaysayan, hindi banta sa peace and order ang pagpapalaganap ng katotohanan. Ating sariwain ang mga alaala at ang mga aral dahil ito ay magiging gabay ng ating bansa sa kung paano tayo tunay na magkakaisa tungo sa kaunlaran na nakabatay sa hustisya, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, noong June 24, 2022, the ICC Prosecutor Karim Khan moved before the ICC pre-trial chambers to reopen the probe on Duterte's war on drugs. Ngayon, according to his reports, the investigations done by the Philippines was not enough and was a mere desk review as they involve mostly administrative and not criminal sanctions. Ano pong masasabi ninyo dito, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor?
Mr. Speaker, that is the position of the ICC in the person of Mr. Khan. But as to the vantage point of the Department of Justice, the agency has been filing cases, has been conducting investigations, and in fact pursuing the cases as reported by the PNP. Therefore, the Department of Justice and all agencies in the Republic of the Philippines are performing their functions for the prosecution of the respondents or of the accused. Therefore, with regard to the DOJ, Department of Justice, we are performing despite the position and opinion of Mr. Khan, Mr. Speaker.
I hope so, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor. Kasi po, yung ni-request na isuspend yung ICC probe noong November 2021 by the Philippine government, ang sinight po talaga na sinabi is to ensure the prosecution of erring police officers. Pero ang nakalagay po doon, ang na-review ay 52 drug raids and na-conduct between 2016 to 2021. So I hope ngayon po meron tayong maibibigay na report kasi kung yon ay 52 drug raids lang, tapos sinasabi natin na inaalam pa natin yung 6,117 suspected drug dealers na pinatay. So at hindi po ito yung cases din na sinasabi ng mga human rights defenders na as high as 30,000. Sana po ay mabigyan tayo ng report, kaugnay ng ano na yung inaabot talaga na investigation dito, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. After all the witnesses will come out and testify and cooperate with the Department of Justice, the Department of Justice will render its report as to what exact figure we are now, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Last question siguro, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor. Kapag nag-investigate ang ICC, is it necessary na magkaroon ng permission from the government of the Philippines kahit ang sinaklaw po ng kanilang i-investigate ay panahon na tayo ay kasama pa at kabilang pa sa ICC as a member state?
It has been, Mr. Speaker, it has been the consistent position of the Department of Justice that the ICC cannot conduct its investigation here in the Philippines. They cannot acquire jurisdiction over the matter because the Philippines are doing the job for the Filipino people with regard to the investigation of the cases as you have mentioned. Second, the Philippines is no longer a member of that. So, Mr. Speaker, that is now the position of the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is the position of the Department of Justice. Pero, Mr. Speaker, ginoong sponsor, pwedeng mag-imbestiga on their own ang ICC at may mga cases na nangyari ito sa ibang mga bansa. Mr. Speaker, ginoong sponsor. Lalo na kung ang issue ay it is crimes against humanity. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Sponsor.
First, with regard to crimes against humanity, Mr. Speaker, yun nga, mayroon tayong principle of complementarity. Second, kung papasok sila rito and then conduct investigations, they don't have compulsory processes. So, I hope that issue will be settled, Mr. Speaker.
Sa pamilya ng DOJ, lalong-lalo na po ang ating mabait na secretary ng DOJ, si Secretary Boying Remulla. Mr. Speaker, nagiging BFF ko na si Secretary. Okay. So, una sa lahat, gusto ko ring ipahayag yung aking kasiyahan sa mga ginagawa ngayon ng DOJ, no, yung performance na ginagawa, lalong-lalo na po yung ginawa niyang yung pag-recommend kay Pangulo doon sa mga 300 plus na mga PDL binigyan ng clemency, etc. So, napapanahon ito, Mr. Speaker, at maraming salamat po. Gusto ko rin magpasalamat doon sa binigay na sulat September 9, 2022 through our chairman, Representative Lizaldico, kaugnay po doon sa report on the Bloody Sunday na siya pong ginawa kong tanong nung nakaraan. So, siguro ilan na lang po, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor na paglilinaw kaugnay. Hindi naman ito doon sa na mga policy lang po ng DOJ na hindi ko rin po natapos noong briefing. So, una po, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, alam ko po na maliit ang binawasan yung budget natin sa Administrative Order number 35 na siya po naman sanang responsable sa pag-iimbestiga doon sa mga torture, disappearances at saka yung mga hindi na mga pagkamatay ng Filipino. Ito po yung on Alston report on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary executions. So in November 2007, Philip Alston, the United Nations Human Rights Council's Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Summary or Arbitrary Execution, released the final report on his fact-finding mission to the Philippines. According to this report, a significant number of hundreds of extrajudicial executions of leftist activists in the Philippines have taken place over the past 6 years, are the result of deliberate targeting by the military as part of the counterinsurgency operations against communist rebel. Unquote, red tagging, as we call it today, is already present back in 2007. And according to the report, and I quote, many in the government have concluded that numerous civil society organizations are quote-unquote fronts of the CPP and its armed group, the New People's Army. One response has been counterinsurgency operation that result in extrajudicial execution of leftist activists. In some areas, the leaders of leftist organizations are systematically hunted down by interrogating and torturing those who may know their whereabouts. And they are often killed following a campaign of individual vilification designed to instill fear in the community. The priorities of the criminal justice system has also been distorted, and it has been increasingly focused on prosecuting civil society leaders rather than their killers. So sinasabi pa dito na so ito po ay kasalukuyan na nangyayari pa rin Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor. At meron po rin siya dito mga summary and recommendations kaugnay noong mga nangyaring mga extrajudicial killings and extra legal killings. Okay. So ang tanong po, one of the recommendation, Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor by the rapporteur is for the prosecutors to provide reasonable decisions for probable cause determination. For example, if the prosecutor already found that the evidence provided by the police lacking or there is no probable, the case should already be dismissed. This way, hindi na makukulong na napakahabang panahon ang political prisoners and victims of trump-up cases. Ano kaya ang masasabi dito ng DOJ? Mr. Speaker, madagdag ko lang, during the DOJ briefing, ang ating Prosecutor General ay meron daw pong guidelines na ginagawa kaugnay nito. So ang tanong ko po, nandyan na po ba yung final version ng guidelines na ginagawa po ng ating Prosecutor General.
Yung, Mr. Speaker, yung pong guideline na ginagawa ng Prosecutor General ay hanggang ngayon ginagawa pa po. So pag lalabas po yung guideline na yon, we will immediately give you a copy of that guideline.
I hereby move that we terminate the deliberations on the budget of the Department of Justice, Mr. Speaker. So move, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader.
And all its attached agencies, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Majority Leader.
On the part of the majority, we join the minority to terminate the budget deliberation of the Department of Justice, including its attached agencies.
There is a joint motion to terminate interpellations of the budget of the Department of Justice, including all its attached agencies. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the interpellations of the budget of the Department of Justice and its attached agencies is hereby terminated. Congratulations. Session suspended.
Oh, sponsor ka